Teachers of Reddit, who is your most successful student ever? Not me, but my high school algebra teacher taught the guy who co-founded Instagram. Apparently he was the kind of student who walked in on a test day, said oh, there's a test crap and then proceeded to ace the test. I was that kind of student too, and here I am on a Sunday afternoon, drinking a Sierra Nevada without pants on. Frick that Instagram guy. Every week in the local library, one of the librarians and I run a class to teach people, mostly people in their 50s upwards, the basics of using a computer from what a mouse does, to sending emails, and how to not get a virus when you surf the web. We started out in late 2009 with about half a dozen people, and by far the oldest of the group was Charlie, who was 84 years old. Despite his age, he was fit as a fiddle and very talkative. When Charlie came in, he knew what the keyboard did, but didn't know how to turn the PC on. The symbols meant nothing to him. Basic concepts such as the Windows Start menu were alien. We do lessons based on a rotating list, each lesson officially lasting 30 minutes, but usually with an extra 30 so everyone is roughly on the same page each week. Charlie was in for an hour each week. We get to the last lesson, and he seems much less afraid of a computer now. Our first graduation walks out the door, and the next week sees a flurry of typed thank you letters arrive at the library. The librarian's tickled pink, and she pins them up on the door of the computer room we've been using. Charlie however had gone one better, as apparently his granddaughter had given him a digital camera. He was very keen on nature, and his letter contained pictures that he had edited and cropped himself, something we didn't even touch on in the lessons. He'd googled how to do this stuff, and it's that spirit that made me think of him when I saw this thread. This makes me happy. I'm not a teacher, but a kid in my business class made these waterproof backpacks. At first they started off as a trend for the local students. However, by the end of the semester he got contracted by the military. I used to teach sewing. In one of my beginner classes, this girl came in with no experience of sewing or crafting but picked it up extremely fast. After I showed the class how to insert a zipper, she came back the next week with a completed, to perfection, A-line skirt. A skirt was supposed to be the final project and that was still another 4 weeks off. For the final she made this gorgeous silk charmeuse, plaid skirt, with matching stripes, that was high-waisted and fully lined for her vow renewal. Some impressive crap, man. Maybe she lied about having no experience. Art teacher here. Had a student my first year teaching. Loved art. Cranked out good work and soaked everything like a sponge. She was only a student my first year and never again, but was in my room every day to learn as much as she could while in high school. We're still in touch, work in my studio together from time to time, and we show work together and do expos often. I prefer showing work with her over any of my colleagues. She's taking a semester off to beef up her portfolio to have the best shot at Masters of Fine Arts program of her choice. Now she's the one encouraging me to get more of an education. What makes her successful in my opinion is her acceptance that failure is an inevitability and an opportunity to learn what to do or not do. She has the drive to always do better, and is very aware that she doesn't know everything. It doesn't hurt that she's definitely not lazy and is very humble about her skill set. Most kids now have a sense of undeserved entitlement or give up before they try because they might fail, or just don't care because they refuse to work for anything. It's too much effort for a lot of kids to read a whiteboard. I wish I was kidding. I wish there were more teachers like you. Thanks. Rory McIlroy was a student of mine for 3 years. When he won his first major he flew him a few days later, rented out a fancy restaurant and took all of the staff from the school out for dinner. I think there were around 65 of us. He paid for everything. That's awesome. I've never been a huge Rory McIlroy fan but he definitely gained some points in my book. I don't have a story, more so just a question. For the teachers who have had extremely successful students, was it obvious that they were going places or did they come out of their shell later in life? I've just always been so curious. Did you know that your student would be a contender for the President of the United States? Or did you just think of them as a regular student? I had a student who'd flunked algebra 6 times before he got to me. I offered him all the help he wanted and he took it, showed up to office hours, asked for extra time, asked tons of questions. I think some people's brains just can't do algebra the way it's intended to be done. But he was able to memorize enough tricks and basic logic to pass with a D. I ran into him years later working for the Tsar. Glad I was able to help him get a college degree. Out of all the students I had, many of whom were more intellectually gifted, he worked the hardest for it. That sort of perseverance and determination has got to have served him well. I'm imagining this scene where the former teacher congratulates a former student on being employed by the Tsar during a security pat-down at the airport. Also not me, but my band director was Pharrell's band director in high school. Evidently he was always coming up with funky butt cadences. My mom and my uncle were both good friends of his since they all were in band at Plaza Junior High and Princess Anne High School together. My mom says that she would partner up with him for history projects and he would always rap the presentations. On Friday I heard a kid going around telling people that he found a book about their mom in the library. He would then pull out a book about humpback whales. I like to imagine that he's going places. This is my favorite one so far. Not me, but my grandmother taught Kanye West in kindergarten. Apparently he was brilliant and gifted even at a young age. This is about a friend of mine from a few years ago. This guy was the sole definition of hopeless. He skipped class, hung out with the wrong crowd, was a pretty arrogant and rude kid in general. I met him through basketball and we just talked here and there, sometimes during lunch. We didn't hang out too often. This went on for about 3 years. The weird part is, during our last year in high school, I never saw the guy at all. So from my perspective, I thought he dropped out because that's something that most of his friends did. Funny thing is, I ran into him during the day of our graduation. This guy, somehow, got accepted to one of the best business schools in the country. I was literally mind blown as to how someone like him had even achieved something of that scale. I asked him about it and he told me something interesting. Apparently, he was called to the office during first semester to discuss his course progress and how he wasn't doing much. At our school this is the principal basically saying you're about to get kicked out. But something great happened, he said. His guidance counselor told him a story about a man who digs holes for a living. So this man just loved digging holes, and while digging holes didn't earn him much money, he still dug because that was his passion. One day, a man came over and asked the digger to work for him, and years later, that man became his own boss, who started his own company, earned an enormous amount of wealth, and eventually raised a family and grew old. Now the moral of the story was that no matter what you do, if you become the best at what you love to do, there will always be someone who will be willing to pay you a lot just because you are among the best in your profession. I still don't understand how, but apparently this guy got so inspired that he faked being expelled, told all his friends that he did, begged if he could still be a student, dropped his current courses and retook all the pre-requisite courses he failed as booklets, self-study, and studied every day at our local library for 8 months. It's astonishing because he completed 2 years worth of courses in a matter of 9 months. And now he's in 3rd year of Canada's Richard Ivey School of Business. Talk about getting quality advice. In 2007, I had a 95-year-old statistics teacher. He was a former college professor to Alan Greenspan. I found that absolutely insane. I have a similar story. One of my college professors studied under Henry Kissinger. As a teacher, I think that you are imagining a different kind of student from the one I am imagining. For us, the most successful students are kids who come from dirt poor, unstable, unsupportive families, and still make it through college to live the American dream with a normal, stable, middle-class life in a job that helps people in their community. The kids that go on to be doctors and professors and lawyers and politicians that come from privileged families. That's great and everything, but it's just to be expected. Now I could lie and tell you all about this homeless student I have that became an astronaut, but I'm not going to do that. I just want you to understand that we teachers think about success in relative terms when it comes to students, because it's about how much of a mountain they had to climb, not how high their final destination was. These threads really make teachers seem like incredible figures. For most people, they are the only parental figures other than a student's parents. They can really change the lives of someone. And sometimes, the only parental figures. My great-great-grandfather taught Albert Einstein what would be the equivalent to middle school nowadays. Apparently he was awful at literature but decent at math. Not me, but I asked my dad. This guy is 21 now apparently, and in my dad's words, unbelievable. He left school at 16 after year 11 UK and went on to study a building course. He carried on doing this until he got into coding as a hobby. He ended up getting an apprenticeship with an IT firm and worked his way up. Within a year he set up his own business selling and designing code for private systems. Now he's rich, and I mean rich. He came back to visit his old school in a privately made Rolls Royce, and my dad found out he actively donates vast amounts of money to charity. So here's the message. You don't need qualifications to make it big, just an idea and the desire to go far. Amazing. I know a bunch of successful people, not anyone with that amount of wealth, to my knowledge, but they have almost exclusively not had any higher education, or an education completely unrelated to the business they made their fortunes with. I'm going to preface this with the usual AskReddit comment start. I'm not in the demographic you're actually asking. That is, I'm not a teacher. However, this is about a friend who was in all my classes. I live in the UK, so for the last 2 years of compulsory school, it's common to study A-levels, the equivalent of graduating from high school in the USA, assuming that you graduate at 18. Normally, people do 3 A-levels, and it's common to start 4. You get a qualification from the first year, and the full thing from the second. At my school, there were a group of us who started 5 A-levels, myself and him included. However, most of us only did 4 for the second year, and some only 3. He continued with all 5. That might not sound like much, but 3 keeps you busy enough for it to be considered full-time education. And then there's the subjects themselves. He was studying maths, further maths, physics, chemistry and biology. I'm pretty sure that he had no time to socialize whatsoever, but that's not all. A couple of years before us, 2 students achieved 4 A grades, the highest possible, at A level, in the same subjects except biology, and this was the first time that anyone had managed it. He got 5 As, with almost full marks in all his exams. So academically, I guess he's the most successful student I've seen. Oh, and he's now studying medicine at Oxford. Thanks for making me want to be sick just so that I can get cured by him. My most successful students graduate college and get a job that pays more than mine. Sometimes we become friends as well, but that's not a mark of success. As someone who teaches college classes and advises students, seeing things like that are a fantastic reward. My mom taught a class at Stanford and one of her students was John Elway. It didn't have anything to do with what my mom taught him, but I'd say he was pretty successful. And to think, all these years later he now has a steakhouse and a car dealership. Now that's inspiring. I'm not a teacher, but my mom is. She taught math to students and one of her students went to MIT sponsored by Samsung. I still think that is awesome and I used to brag about it to all my friends during elementary school, haha. One of my mom's students went to MIT and got a scholarship. Isn't really playground bragging material. I had a teacher whom I respect to no end tell me that I was the best student he has ever had. Tell your students, it gives them motivation to do great things. And it pisses everyone else off and inflates those kids' egos. There's a kid in my year at school who always has teachers telling him he's the best student ever. The kid has an ego to height of Mt. Everest. One of the substitute teachers I had in high school taught Mark Hamill. Don't remember the teacher's name, but we all referred to him as Father Time. I'm not a teacher but a student, and my physics teacher told our class about a student who left my school in the UK about 6 years ago and is now earning about £800,000 a year at age 24 working in the USA. Doctors hate him. I had a senior who was easily writing and reading at grad school levels. This kid could process anything you threw at her. She had severe anorexia and bulimia, to the point to where she had to go to Oakland Children's Hospital to get supplements. She was in a special program, home and hospital, and I was her tutor. She was on death's door and only getting worse. This was 8 years ago. Often the most talented have the hardest time. My teacher, who is a religious sister in the congregation of Notre Dame, taught Whoopi Goldberg. Karen Johnson is her real name. She said Whoopi was really an average student as far as grades go, but she was really nice and into theater club and stuff like that. Whoopi has mentioned her in an interview before, in fact. A family friend is a teacher who, when in training, taught Gareth Bale for a time. On the day he transferred to Real Madrid, she wrote a Facebook status saying that she once told him that your grades will get you further than football ever will. She now regrets that. My English teacher told us about one student who now goes to Harvard. She was a track star and her final weighted grade point average, took 5 AP classes, was 103 out of 100. I'm pretty sure that's success. I thought GPA with AP could only go up to a 5.0. This is some next level crap right here. My dad has taught marketing all around the world, so some of his most successful students have been various models or mostly rich as heck business dudes. I know of several Fortune 500 CEOs that took his courses. He's even taught an astronaut. Not sure what an astronaut needs an MBA for, but hey, why not, I guess. My mom is an elementary school teacher and one of her students went on to actually suck my dong when we made it to high school, so that was pretty successful. I'm not a teacher, but I have a story about what a teacher said to me once, if that's alright with everyone. Now I don't know if you really meant this, or was just trying to be nice, but my English teacher in 8th grade told me this at the end of the year. She said, "Fluctuation of Mahoy Burr, if it weren't for you, I'd come into class high as a kite because I really can't take these stupid M anymore." I should mention that I went to public school, so stupid people weren't really all that uncommon. There were those, however, who did try and we made it out alive. I went to public school as well, and yes, we had some pretty stupid people across the board. For example, in my AP government class, a girl asked how often the Queen was up for re-election and how did she manage to get re-elected. Not a teacher, but my computer science game design teacher in high school told me one of his students became the vice president for a really big gaming company and he visited our school once to talk to us about his job. One of my English teachers my freshman year taught NASCAR drive Denny Hamlin. That was pretty cool when I found that out. My mother works at an institution for immigrant kids and kids from broken households as a helping teacher. One of her students came from Eritrea, didn't know a word of German at age of 12. After 6 years with 3 lessons a week, my mother got her to apply to a college and study medicine. She is now a doctor who got famous for a book she wrote. So yeah, my mother is awesome. I used to teach English in China and one of my students is on Facebook. He put a photo of him and Prince Harry or whatever his name is on there last year and all the rest of his photos are of him and supermodels and all the expensive crap he buys. But he hasn't actually done crap except be born into extreme privilege and wealth. Frick him. One of my students ended up being one of the key figures for Microsoft in the creation of the Xbox, so that's pretty cool. Reading this thread makes me wonder if in my 12 years of grade school that I may be considered their most successful student. It's a little terrifying working towards that expectation. Teachers can have thousands of students. Don't worry, the odds are against that being the case. I had a student who went on a full ride from the US Navy to UC Berkeley for engineering. He is not allowed to tell me what he does for a living. I'm not a teacher, but a friend of mine is and taught Tim Minchin at a well-known private school in Perth, Western Australia. Said he was a really good, likable and smart kid too. I offered to teach guitar lessons in a small island community. A local man had his teenage, 16, son staying with him for the summer, didn't really know what to do with him. Bought him a cheap guitar and set up some lessons with me. The first week I showed him some chords and folk songs. The second week he showed up with recordings of rock stuff he wanted to learn and got me to write out the chords. By this time the paint was all worn off his fingerboard up to the 10th fret. The third week he got me to demonstrate how to transcribe chords from those recordings. Along with this, he was teaching himself how to play leads from my having once demonstrated scales and their relationship to chords. By the 4th week he was teaching me stuff. I often wonder what became of him. I never saw such a natural. Not me, but my history teacher Mrs. Stein used to teach in NY. In the classroom next to her was Tupac. He'd always get kicked out of class for goofing off and then sneak over and sit in on Mrs. Stein's class. She'd allow him because he told her he wanted to see what both teachers had to teach. My chem sub had Natalie Portman as a student. She was extremely smart, learn AP bio chapters in less than a week and achieve 95/100 on every single exam. I don't know how he turned out, but he was my favorite and most gifted person I have ever met. I taught advanced English in 91-92. We talk after class and I had him call me by my first name, instead of Mr. Anderson. I'd give, let's call him Charlie, books to read and write reports on. I think there were 10+ books I gave him. The last was The Fountainhead. Wherever you are, Charlie, I hope you're happy. Kapurk soft bean gorel flower cough. Not a lot of famous people. A lot of people saying that success isn't about becoming rich and famous, but rather it is more about breaking through some barriers and becoming above average people along the way. Not that this isn't true, but I was hoping to see more famous people, even if it was just made up. A lot of people post bullcrap like you can't make it if you weren't born it. This attitude is dangerous and discouraging. The people who are born it were born it because their parents or grandparents took the effort to become successful. If you do what their parents or grandparents did, your children will be born into it. There are more new millionaires than old millionaires. People who have inherited old money. 80% of millionaires earned their money. 20% inherited it. Were born into it. Now baby boomrz ruined America. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.